So I was able to catch a preview screening of The Last Showgirl, directed by Coppola and written by Kate Gersten and starring Pamela Anderson, Jamie Lee Curtis, Dave Bautista, and I wasn't cognizant of who she was in the moment until afterwards, but Billie Lourd, who is also known as Carrie Fisher's daughter. So this is a small indie film. I was able to see a preview screening that had Coppola, Anderson, and Gersten in person to do Q&A afterwards. So I have a little bit of insight into the behind the scenes stuff, which I'm going to throw in as it goes. So this is a film that was shot in 18 days in Las Vegas, and it is the story of the titular Last Showgirl, portrayed by Pamela Anderson, who is this woman in her, let's say, upper 40s, who has been a showgirl since the 80s in Vegas in the last old style big spectacle showgirl show. And I'm not going to give anything away here beyond the basic concept. And she finds out that the show is closing. And what does she do? She's getting by as a showgirl in this show, although the paychecks have been getting slimmer over time. And it's what does she do with her life? What does she do with the life she has crafted? And all of her friendships are based around the show. The relationship with her daughter, who's played by Lourd, is very fragmented and very not good because she put everything she had into being a showgirl. She put career first, and now what does she do, and what does she have to show for all these years? You have Jamie Lee Curtis as a former fellow showgirl who's now a cocktail waitress, being very sassy. You have maybe the biggest surprise for me was Dave Bautista, who people know from, Guardians of the Galaxy and being a big tough guy, badass in movies. He plays the guy who's sort of the behind the scenes showrunner, show director, what have you, stage manager. And he's just like this really sensitive, nice guy. And he's really good in this. And at first I was like, oh, wow, it's him. And then afterwards you're like, no, I'm just watching this character, this big guy with, a heart of gold, so to speak. And it was very intimately shot. For the most part, a lot of handheld. At first, I was like, oh God, this is going to be one of these movies where the camera is 2 inches away and shaky and half out of focus all the time. It does do that, but it's not always like that. So that went away for me after a while. And the question is Pamela Anderson. We know her as that 90s it girl, Baywatch, Barbed Wire, all that stuff. And she's since sort of pulled away from Hollywood and sort of transformed herself. And the question is, how would she be in this movie? And at first, I'm like, ooh, she's acting really weird. And then I realized, wait, no, that's the character. Her character is this very very high-voiced, very kind of simple, perky, optimistic, no matter what, we'll get through this and have fun, and everything. We're always going to look on the bright side kind of person. And that's the character she portrays, and she does it really well. Everything is done really well. It's this little slice of life movie. It's this little slice into that world of the last of the showgirls, and the elder. Hey, it's weird to say elder for Pamela Anderson, but she's the eldest person on that crew of showgirls, and all of the younger ones who are looking to get jobs doing other things that are far more salacious and having less reverence for the spectacle and the legacy of the show than it just being a job. And her sort of becoming the mother figure for a lot of them. And it just works really well. Like, everybody in it is really solid. Found out from the Q&A that Gersten had spent time working on a show that was sort of adjacent to Jubilee, which was the last of the big showgirl shows at Bally's in Las Vegas, which I was able to actually see toward the end of its run. And it was amazing just to see, what it felt like going back in time, at least to the early 80s, if not earlier, when I saw this just not that many decade or two ago. Time flies. It's hard to remember, but it wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things. Apparently, Gersten had worked with a comedian who was using the stage when Jubilee wasn't, and she was able to meet a lot of the Jubilee dancers and people behind the scenes. So a lot of what's in this film is really drawn from conversations she had with those people and what she witnessed in the waning days of that Showgirl spectacle show. And indeed, I guess the technical advisor on this show was somebody who was in Jubilee, and all of the costumes you see in The Last Showgirl were costumes from Jubilee. I guess she says it's all, the stuff is still all there. Some of the sets were so gigantic they couldn't get them out of the casino or the showroom where they existed, so the sets are still there and the costumes are still there, and the show is long gone, but the ghosts of it live on. So it's a good movie. You know, there was a moment I did find, and I won't say what it is, but there's a thing in screenwriting that bugs me where somebody just won't do a thing. Somebody is like, I just need to tell you, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I just need to tell you this one thing. I don't want to, I've heard enough from you. Those kind of things that as a viewer, I find very frustrating. And as somebody who watches a lot of movies, I'm like, this is just a little bit of an annoying trait to keep conflict going or to keep a story going, when if somebody would just stop and hear those 3 words the other person has to say, you know, things would be resolved. There is one moment like that between Anderson and a younger fellow cast member in Jubilee that to me felt like out of character for the Anderson character, what we knew of her up to that point in the movie, and felt like it existed to cause conflict later. But other than that, I thought this was really good. It's a little indie movie. You know, this isn't a big splashy thing. It's funny, it's sad, it's touching. The various characters. Jamie Lee Curtis has a big moment in the film. Anderson has several. You see a cameo from a Gia Coppola being granddaughter of Francis Ford Coppola, various family members, and Gersten is related to her. Various family members are involved in behind the scenes in this film, and you see a family member in front of the camera that is recognizable in this film. But it's really good. So I'm talking about this very early. This does not come out until January, but if you're watching this clip in January, go see it. The Last Showgirl from Roadside Pictures.